I don't know how many people hold the same level of influence and relevancy to the world of Japanese media, art, and even global entertainment than the work of the late Akira Toriyama. Even after his passing, the Dragon Ball IP keeps being one of the biggest franchises in the world, and at the same time his art in other forms of media such as video games and the Dragon Quest series is more than just present. But what if I told you that the work of Toriyama also inspired many of your favorite fighting games? And in this video, we are gonna discuss how the style and art of Akira Toriyama transformed him into one of the artists that secretly inspired fighting games the most. And well, I don't think we can talk about how Akira Toriyama inspired fighting games without going over the Street Fighter series. A lot of people consider Street Fighter the fighting game, especially in Japan, and there has always been kind of like this unconscious idea, I would say, that the original Dragon Ball actually inspired the first Street Fighter game, and specifically the Hadouken, the iconic move that Ryu does on Street Fighter 1 in 1987. And actually, the first manga in which the Kamehameha, the potential inspiration for the Hadouken, appeared was on 1986, so there is a chance, but the creator of these moves on Street Fighter has actually stated publicly that even though he was inspired by manga and anime of the time, it was not Dragon Ball. And the real inspiration for the Hadouken, stated publicly on an interview by the creator of the move, was actually the anime from the 70s, Space Battleship Yamato. But here's where things get really interesting, because okay, the Hadouken is not really inspired from Dragon Ball, but what if I told you that one of the most iconic characters in the history of the Street Fighter series is essentially Super Saiyan Goku? In the year 1991, we saw for the first time one of the most iconic transformations in all of media with the Super Saiyan in the Namek saga of Dragon Ball Z. And then 3 years later, with the release of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, a new hidden boss on the Street Fighter series would later become one of the most famous, if not the most famous boss character in the Street Fighter intellectual property. And the original instructions to make this character come to life were, and I quote, "Draw a Super Saiyan." To prepare this video, I did an extensive amount of research. I checked a ton of books with art and illustrations, also exclusive information, some interviews that were translated from Japanese to English, and I encountered specifically one book which is called the Street Fighter Memorial Archive from 2018, in which there's literally an entire page that talks about how when Akuma was created, people were literally given instructions to draw a Super Saiyan. And it says, originally Okamoto-san had said, "Draw a Super Saiyan," and Akiman-san just drew one verbatim, but he thought it was too obvious, so he slept on it at night, woke up, and drew the Akuma we have now. Okay, so saying that the work of Akira Toriyama had some influence in the Street Fighter series is probably even an understatement, and if you don't believe me, maybe you would believe the words of Katsuhiro Harada, the creator of the Tekken series. You can say that there was a major difference with Western media in that Dragon Ball was the first to show in a visual aspect, you know, the Kamehameha, which was basically, to Eastern philosophy, is something that is relatively known that you have this ki and the way you manifest it. Normally you wouldn't be able to see it visually, but to take that and make it something you could visually recognize in manga and later in anime, and not just that, but the earth splitting or the smoke and effects that are created when you concentrate a power, these are all things that Dragon Ball was one of the first to show off. And not just Tekken, but a lot of Japanese games were probably influenced by the way you show this kind of power in a fighter. Even though in the West they had Superman that could shoot lasers and stuff like that, this kind of visual way that the Eastern arts showed off the ki and how everything is displayed is kind of unique to Dragon Ball. Maybe Street Fighter wouldn't even have a fireball if it wasn't for Dragon Ball, or at least the way it was visually shown. And wait just one second, before we move on from this section of the video, I want to show you one more thing which is on the same book. It is on a page that has a big table and it has kind of like historical events and how they connect with the release of different Street Fighter games. And for 1988 it says, oh look, for example, the Soviet Union Social Revolution happened, the Perestroika. And then on the same space, it also says, oh, but the release of Dragon Quest 3 also happened, and it became a social phenomenon. So this can kind of help you to understand, and it illustrates how relevant all the work of Akira Toriyama and his art was and still is for Japanese culture and other Japanese artists, because everything that is on Dragon Quest, visually speaking, the characters, the monsters, was designed by Toriyama. He is the original illustrator of the Dragon Quest series all the way from the first game until 2024. Hey, just in case that the content has been fun or interesting for you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to support the channel. It really helps me out and would appreciate it a ton, especially if you like fighting games. And now let's continue. But the overall influence of Toriyama in the fighting game genre doesn't end here, because there has been multiple creators from diverse franchises that have talked about how Dragon Ball was a huge inspiration for their projects. For example, the creator behind the Guilty Gear franchise, Daisuke Ishiwatari, if I'm saying his name right, has said publicly on multiple interviews that he's really inspired by anime and manga, and that Guilty Gear as an IP is in many ways the representation of that style on video game form, but also he has talked about how Dragon Ball as an IP has kind of given form to the Guilty Gear characters and the way in which he thinks of characters as a concept. Daisuke has said publicly, and I quote, "I always wanted to create a game, and secondly, I always loved the dramatic art and style of manga and anime, and wanted to create a game which emphasized that. So I guess that is what got me started on creating Guilty Gear." And in addition to that, he has also said when talking about the first Guilty Gear game, the next thing. Basically, when we started making the game, we took a look at the existing fighting games. It seemed like the characters in these games always had one specific fighting style that they use. When we were thinking about making our own, I looked at things like Dragon Ball and saw that they didn't necessarily have a particular fighting style. It was more that they were like superhuman or very superhuman type characters. When we were making the game, I wanted to make a game that was more focused on the action rather than a specific fighting style or the fighting itself. So it was more of an action concept than rather a fighting game concept. And to be completely honest with you, taking into account the words of Daisuke himself and everything that we've been discussing in this video, I don't know if there's a better full circle moment in the history of fighting games than the fact that Arc System Works would end up making one of the best-selling Dragon Ball video games of all time, and what is also considered by many people as one of the best modern fighting games of the last decade in Dragon Ball FighterZ. And now you might be thinking that the video is over and you're sad, crying on a corner, but there is one more Easter egg that I want to talk about, which is that the creator of the Melty Blood franchise and the person behind the visual novels that inspired that specific series of fighting games has also talked about how Dragon Ball was a direct inspiration for the combat in the visual novel and for the style of the fighting game. And now the video is over. I'm sorry people, okay? Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate it to support the channel, and of course all my love to the work of the late Akira Toriyama. As someone that was born in Latin America, I cannot overstate how influential and relevant his work is for any young man that was born in the 80s, 90s, or even early 2000s. So thank you Akira Toriyama, and see you on the next one guys, take care.